Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandjana. Little faster. Jasodanandana Brajajanarandjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Slow down. Yep. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanarandjana Jasodanandana Brajajanarandjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Too fast. Jaya Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Pariviragacharya Astatara Satasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gorpimanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Two little small requests. If you have a cell phone, do the needful. And if you have small children that are running around and making noise, do the needful. Take them to where they can make noise and be happy outside. During this visit to Seattle Temple, I'm going to be conducting a seminar. This is part 3 of that seminar on Sadhu-Sangastaka. There are some verses spoken by Kapila Dev to Devahuti on the importance of devotee association. Sadhu-Sanga. Devotee association. And those verses are part of chapter 25 of the third canto, which is called The Glories of Devotional Service. And what I'm going to do now is make a little review of first number of verses that we covered earlier today. Very quick review. And then I'm going to cover 4 more verses after that. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 6 verses. So, pictured here is Kapila Dev, an incarnation, a plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead. He's an avatar of Vishnu, who appeared in Satya Yuga as the grandson of Lord Brahma. One of Brahma's direct sons was Kardama Muni. Amongst the 10 great sages that were given the service of increasing praja, one of them given that service was Kardama Muni. Kardama Muni married, by the Lord's own direct arrangement, the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, one of the daughters of Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu had 3 daughters and 2 sons, Devahuti, Prasuti, and Akuti. And Priyavrata and Uttanapada were his sons. Uttanapada was the father of Dhruva Maharaj, and the line of Dhruva Maharaj is also described in the Bhagavatam. So this is one of the daughters, Devahuti. And her position is most exalted. She is on the platform of spiritual perfection, although she spoke about herself in a very humble mood, as if she was not at all so exalted, something more like us, and just an honest version of one of us. So we'll hear a little bit of that in her presentation. Earlier today we heard her, there's some verses describing the glories of Kapila Dev and the glories of hearing about the personality of Godhead, Krishna Katha, like that. Then some questions between Maitreya and Vidura, some of their talks about Lord Kapila Dev, and then Devahuti begins. So here's, as it says on the headline here, the context. This is from the previous chapter, or just the storyline of the unfolding of these events. Kardama Muni and Devahuti were married, and 9 daughters and 1 son were born of them. The 9 daughters, by Lord Brahma's direct arrangement, were married to different sages, and specifically for the purpose of propagating very good quality offspring, because this is the very beginning of creation, and they wanted to populate the planet and the universe that Lord Brahma had just created. So when Kapila Dev, the son, was of age enough to take care of his mother, Kardama Muni returned to the forest to resume his practice of meditation on the personality of Godhead, as was the process, the Yuga Dharma, the process for spiritual perfection. So he had gone, as it says, to leave family life, and there's some discussion in relation to his leaving, and Devahuti's now in the care of her son, Prabhupada explains in the purports that in the Vedic system, it's not be unmarried, brahmachari for some time, become married and stay forever in family life. That's not the Vedic system. When family life is completed, then one enters the vanaprastha stage of life. And it's the duty of the elder son to take care of the mother so that the father can enter this stage for his own spiritual perfection, and the mother will feel fine that she's in the care of her family members. So after Kardama Muni left, Devahuti and Kapila Dev were residing on the shore or the bank or the strand of the Bindu Sarovar. Sarovar means lake or pond, a body of water. And Bindu Sarovar was where they were. And this event was being discussed, as you see in the picture here, by the sages of Naimisharanya, headed by Shaunaka. He's the one with the big beard in the front. And speaking is Sutta Goswami. So the whole of the Bhagavatam is being narrated, Sutta speaking to Shaunaka and the sages in Naimisharanya. And he's speaking what he heard from Shukadev Goswami. So Shaunaka, pictured, well, you can't see. There's Shaunaka. Nice big full beard. He's the eldest amongst the sages and senior most. So he's inquiring from Sutta Goswami. After Kardama Muni left, then what happened? What were the activities of the Lord, Kapila Dev? So he answered by describing the dialogue between Maitreya and Vidura, where the same topic was discussed. And so the conversation begins, or the response begins, by explaining the purpose of Lord Kapila Dev's appearance. He had appeared in this world as an avatar for the purpose of disseminating transcendental knowledge, specifically Sankhya philosophy or Sankhya yoga. And who was to benefit all human beings. And in these verses, Sutta Goswami, or rather Maitreya, is saying that the personality of Godhead is the most perfect being. There isn't one who excels him. There isn't one who is equal to him. He's the most knowledgeable of all. He's, by all yogis, he's worshipable. The yogis, they meditate upon the Lord of the heart, Paramatma. And Kapila Dev is none different. He's the Supreme Lord who's manifesting in the world before everyone. He's the master of the Vedas. So to hear what he spoke and to hear about his pastimes is most elevating. So that's what we're doing this evening, getting elevated. Just by sound vibration. And then Maitreya speaks about the value of the hearing process itself. By hearing about the Supreme Lord, one is associating with him directly by the process of hearing. And when one does that, not only the ear becomes very satisfied, but all of the senses become very satisfied. We discussed this because when the heart becomes illuminated with transcendental knowledge, one wants to serve. And when the senses are engaged in serving the Lord, they're satisfied. Like nothing else can satisfy them. No sense gratification can satiate the senses. There's always more, and different varieties of something. But one actually becomes satisfied, fully satisfied, just from this process, starting with this process of hearing. So there's some description in the beginning of the chapter about the value of hearing, which is what Devahuti is proposing to Kapila Dev. Please explain. She's expressing herself in a very humble manner that material existence, she's now matured as an experienced person of the world. Previously she was a princess, the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, great emperor, and then by her choosing she married a brahmana, not just a very exceptional brahmana, not just one of that category, and served him for a long time. And then her children growing. And so she's very matured of age and also very matured and pure in her devotion. She's so qualified, the personality of Godhead has become her son. But she's speaking of herself as being like one of us, immersed in material existence. She says, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, O my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. And Srila Prabhupada explains that not only in this human form of life, but in each of the different species of life, from the animal body to the human body and below. It's simply the senses pursuing objects of the senses and material existence over and over again. So she's tired of that material existence, and she wishes transcendental life instead. She says, Your Lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental I, which by your mercy only I have attained after many births. So to receive transcendental knowledge is a great fortune, not accessible below the human form, and even within the human form it's most rare, and she's appreciating her good fortune. We spoke about this word paragam that appears in the verse. Paragam means one who can take one to the other side of material existence. We're moving along the path of life, and before us is material existence. And it's like a big ocean. And how do you cross a big ocean? You need a strong boat and a good captain to take the boat across the ocean. So the Sanskrit word paragam is there. She, Devahuti, is saying that you are that, paragam. By your presence in my life as you are now, you can carry me to the other side of material. Just your association can carry me to the other side of material existence. She speaks this way, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She knows that for a fact because Lord Brahma told her when she was still pregnant, carrying Kapila Dev. Lord Brahma appeared and worshipped the child within her womb and praised Devahuti's good fortune, that a form of the Lord is soon going to appear as your son. So she knew this wasn't just my son, my child, but the personality of Godhead has appeared. So she's addressing him that way. You're the Supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of ignorance of the universe. Forms of the Lord, they appear to give teachings that lift the population of the conditioned souls to the state of enlightenment. Prabhupada in his purport explains, it's by the grace of the Lord that one is allowed to enjoy this material world. But when one is disgusted with material enjoyment and is frustrated, then this is when one sincerely surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord, and then the Lord is so kind that he frees one from material entanglement. at the heart of material experience is both misery and suffering. The greatest misery is forgetfulness of our loving relationship with the Supreme. So whether it's warm or cold, whether it's rich or poor, whether it's light or dark, or happy, sad, or up or down, or whatever the feature of duality is for the day, or the moment, the soul that's separated from their relationship with the Supreme is uncomfortable. It's the essence of misfortune. So that misfortune can be rectified by, again, making proper contact with the Supreme. Prabhupada writes, ignorant of his true identity and identifying with his body, he searches out material objects for his pleasure, thinking, I am the enjoyer, and the world is meant for me to exploit. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. And whatever success, temporary enjoyment is that. It's simply temporary. And still the eternal soul is searching for that lasting happiness that never happens. Devahuti understood these things. She was not an ordinary personality, very, very elevated personality. So she wished to terminate that sojourn in material existence, right to its very root. And she requested the kind assistance of Kapila Dev to help her in this way. I've taken shelter of your lotus feet because you are the only person of whom to take shelter. You are the axe which can cut the tree of material existence. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you, who are the greatest of all transcendentalists, and I inquire from you as to the relationship between man and woman, Purusha and Prakriti, and spirit and matter. This is Sankhya, understanding the difference between spirit and matter. So, and act that way, act in the consciousness of our true identity as spirit soul. This is just review of our prior session. Hearing Devahuti's questions, Kardama Muni is feeling very pleased that she's asking for the welfare of others specifically, and he begins his explanation. This inquisitive spirit, Brahma Jigyasu, in the language of the Vedas, Vedanta, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. The human form of life is meant for inquisitiveness into the absolute, Brahma Jigyasa. In his commentary of the verse that we ended with, so this is the last part of the review. And last one is interested in understanding his spiritual life or his constitutional position, and unless he also feels inconvenience in material existence, his human form of life is spoiled. We spoke about this as a theme. Accepting things favorable, rejecting things unfavorable. Anukalyasya sankalpa, pratikalyasya varjanam. These are the initial symptoms of the mood of one who is surrendering to the Supreme Lord, taking shelter of his lotus feet and letting go of the contaminating influences that cover one's consciousness. So that's our review. Now, the very next verse, Lord Kapila begins to make his reply. Starts with text 13. And the upcoming chapters, something like another 10 chapters worth, are being summarized in the verses you're going to hear this evening. So there's like little compressed sound bites of information. So listen carefully. And then he will expand them. The personality of God had answered. The yoga system, so she wants to know how to get relief and get connected again with the Lord. So that's what yoga means, the yoga system, which relates to the Supreme Lord and the individual soul. So it connects them. That's this Sankhya Yoga. It's very ancient. It's meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entity. I remember one of the first two words in Sanskrit that I learned from Prabhupada was prayas and shreyas. Prayas means short-term benefit. Shreyas means long-term benefit. And Prabhupada gave the example of a child. The child likes to play. There must be some children that don't like to play, but I've never met one. They all like to play. There's one family in the Potomac, Maryland area, near our Potomac Temple. And the family moved from one house to another house because they heard some good things about the school district in that other place. So they moved from this house to that house. And I asked their son, how do you like this new school? I said, I really like it. Why do you like it? He said, there's more time to play. That's the standard of a good school. So children like to play. That's natural, it's nice. But at a certain point, they have to go to school. So their parents explain, one day you're going to grow up, hopefully. And when you grow up, there's going to be adult needs that you have to look after. So now you have to take some time and go to school. You defer the immediate pleasure or gratification for something that's long-term pleasure or gratification. So the first is short-term, prayas. And then the long-term is shreyas. And the ultimate long-term is shreya uttama. Jigyasu shreya uttama. One who has that inquisitiveness into the ultimate good of the living entity. Tasmat gurun prapadyeta. Jigyasu shreya uttama. The Vedas say that person needs a teacher. They need a spiritual master. Because you can't find that on your own. And in this verse, the word nikshreyasya is there. Ultimate benefit. This yoga system, he's saying, is meant for the ultimate benefit, you see in the verse, in the words here. Ultimate benefit of the living entity. What is that ultimate benefit of the living entity? There's playing, and then there's education, and then there's ultimate benefit. So there's material benefit, there's spiritual benefit, and there's ultimate benefit. Even beyond, so spiritual, material benefit, or the result of material attachment, is whatever it is that one gains is limited, not unlimited, quite limited, and it doesn't last long. It's temporary. And it's insubstantial. You could spend some time discussing that one. But here's a table. Substantial, right? It's solid. It's a nice chair. But sometime before the table was here, it was something else. It was a tree. And then before it was a tree, it was earth. And before it was earth, it was some kind of organic matter that decomposed and became earth. And sometime after it's a table, it's going to become ashes and water vapor. So What it is now is table, but it's not enduring. It's not substantial. Although, from the material point of view, it's considered substantial. You pay some money to get it. It's substantial. And you're using it for something. That's practical and substantial. But it's unenduring. This is the teaching of the Vedas. That which is enduring is the soul. It's sat. It's eternal. And so spiritual happiness or spiritual attachment is on the platform not of the body, which is temporary, but on the platform of the soul. And the consciousness of the soul, and this, as the consciousness of the soul moves to the position from attachment to matter to attachment to the platform of the soul, that's Shreya. That's our long-term benefit. And then there's Nikshrayasya or Shreya Uttama. And that's when the soul connects with the Supreme, with Krishna in devotion, in the loving exchange on the spiritual platform. Then I can still use this temporary body and its temporary senses and the temporary objects of the senses in some ultimately substantial way, under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, making an offering of some service. Therefore, he's speaking of this this yoga process as something that's very ancient and the real interest of the soul. And when the real interest of the soul is attained, there's a very nice byproduct, and that is detachment from all temporary things. Upa rati. There's a nice word in Sanskrit, rati. Rati means where there's great feeling, attachment. When you're very attached to something, whatever that something is, it can be a car or your money or something of this world. If the object is temporary, then it's going to disappoint you. At some point it's gone. You're gone or it's gone, and your object, the happiness is gone. So uparati is beyond that attachment or detachment. Detachment, that's complete. What's that experience of life where there's complete detachment? It's when the heart is feeling so full that you're absorbed in your loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. And things that are of this world, whether it's of the category of happiness or distress. Dukkasya cha, sukhasya cha. You're indifferent to it. Prabhupada gives this example. Supposing you're at the end of the day and you're feeling a little tired, ready to retire for the day, and a very good friend you haven't seen in a long time, they come. You're tired, you forget everything else. You spend time and you're feeling very enlivened being with them. You just, all the worldly things just go away. Maybe you're hungry, maybe you were tired. Just, you forget it because you're so enlivened in that association. And that's doesn't mention who he explained it to. But in the Padma Purana, it's mentioned that he previously taught to Lord Brahma, his grandfather, the original knower of the whole Vedas. But this Sankhya Yoga system is so sublime and so wonderful. Lord Brahma wanted to hear it from an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. And Bhrigu Muni, great sage amongst sages, Bhrigu learned this from Kapila Dev. In his commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that Narada Muni heard Sankhya philosophy from Lord Kapila Dev. So, as elevated as these personalities are, most elevated amongst elevated persons, here's Devahuti. Not particularly a great sage or a great philosopher or some learned personality, but he's going to explain the same to her. That is to say, it's not scholarship that makes this accessible. It's hearing it from the right source. All of us gathered together. Some have different capacities for hearing and understanding things. But the qualification is not, if you have a PhD, then you can understand, and if you have a master's degree, maybe you can understand a little bit, and so on. If you're just a high school kid, forget it. Has nothing to do with age or material qualification. It's an eternal principle of the soul's connection with the Supreme Lord. And in his purport, Prabhupada is saying that although he's Lord Kapila Dev, he's repeating something that's not new. He's not creating something new. A qualified person doesn't do that. A qualified person, even Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he refers to the authority of the Vedas. What he's speaking is consistent with the authority of the Vedas, although he's the source of the Vedas. He still refers to the Vedas. So in contrast, it's not something that is very, very wonderful and super excellent, is a new creation. Especially in spiritual subject matters. It's not invented, but a very ancient tradition. He writes, when we have a super excellent process already present in our Vedic scriptures, there's no need to concoct a new system to mislead the innocent public. Then he describes the stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life. But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. Now he's just presenting a principle. In the outline to Devahuti, there's 24 elements. Maybe some of you are familiar with that system, the 24 elements. Let's do it really quickly. 23 is the easy number to come up with. This Chaitana is the 24th. It's contaminated consciousness or material consciousness. So when the Supreme Lord is transforming the unmanifest to the manifest state, he does so by glancing over that pradhan, the sum total of the undifferentiated material elements. The big warehouse, everything's a big jumble. Pradhan. By his glance, the living entities are injected within that pradhan. By his glance, they're carried. And the time energy carried, and it starts to differentiate out. Different elements start to separate. So then the 24 elements start to appear. The first one that separates out is our dear friend, false ego. And then false ego mixes with modes of nature. So when false ego mixes with the mode of goodness, another dear friend, the mind, appears. Then false ego mixes with passion, material intelligence appears. False ego mixes with ignorance, the 5 gross elements appear. And from the 5 gross elements, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the 5 working senses, and the 5 objects of the senses. That was pretty fast. We just got 20. 5, 5, 5, and 5. Plus another 3. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. That's 23 out of 24. This one is 24th is Chaita. It's contaminated consciousness. Later in chapter 20, the next chapter, Kapila Dev describes the Devahuti that consciousness is originally pure. He gives an example of rain that's falling from the sky. It's distilled water. And before it hits the earth and becomes muddied by contact with the earth, it's pure. He then explains, similarly, consciousness is originally pure. In the beginning state of creation, pure consciousness is existing. But when that pure consciousness, as mentioned in this verse, when it's attracted by the modes of material nature, it becomes contaminated. But that same consciousness, instead of being attracted to matter or the modes of material nature, same consciousness becomes attracted to the personality of Godhead. That's the platform of liberation. So let's go back to Devahuti's question. She's describing, she has knowledge. She knows what her circumstance is. I'm in this complex thing where my senses are attracted. They're agitated and disturbed, and my mind is reeling, and it's lifetime after lifetime, so many lifetimes of this experience. I want relief. I want your shelter instead. So through that attachment to the Supreme, that's the yoga system, it's the platform of liberation. He's saying it explicitly, in very simple language. Here's Prabhupada's purport. Short. Guneshu means in relation to the gunas, the modes of nature. Guneshu, or Maya consciousness, involves attachment to the 3 modes of nature, under which one works sometimes in goodness and knowledge, sometimes in passion, and sometimes in ignorance. These different qualitative activities, with the central attachment for material enjoyment. Material enjoyment means enjoyment apart from the Supreme, apart from God. Really simple definition of material and spiritual. What does spiritual mean in relation to God? What does material mean in forgetfulness of God? Same thing. Take an object. Is this material or spiritual? If it's used in Krishna's service, it becomes spiritualized. This microphone. It's dead matter. It's not good or bad. But it can act in a spiritual way if it's used in God's service. It's not innately spiritual or material. It's the consciousness with which we regard the object. It can act spiritually, or it can act the other way. Consciousness behind the activity. The other way. One's mind becomes purified. So behind the mind, well, the mind is behind the senses, and behind the senses is consciousness. So where we direct consciousness is going to determine where the mind goes, and where the mind goes is going to determine where the senses go, and whether in material or spiritual consciousness. So he's explaining a principle, expanding on a principle that was previously mentioned, is where does our consciousness go? The yoga system is your consciousness goes to the Supreme. Just like in our process, it's very simple. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's the sound vibration. Now where is your consciousness? It's a practice not just of making sound vibrations, although make sound, the sound of the mantra. But it's where your consciousness goes when making that sound vibration. And the practice is to bring your consciousness to Krishna, bring your mind to Krishna, bring your attention to the sound of the holy name. Because the sound of the holy name and Krishna himself, they're non-different. Abhinatvam nama namino. According to the scriptural explanation, the name and the object named, when it's on the spiritual platform, are non-different. We can't say that about something material. Common example. If I say water, 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 it doesn't quench my thirst. I want some more water. Become parched. But if you say Krishna, then that sound vibration and the person are non-different because of the transcendental absolute nature of Krishna. Krishna and Krishna are non-different. So when we're chanting Krishna's name, just as when we were reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is in this case the glories of Lord Kapila Dev, that sound vibration and the person are non-different. So the practice is to bring our consciousness to that sound vibration. The process is simple. It's just we're very covered. Our consciousness is very thick and dense. So it takes a lot of practice. But the process is very simple and it's very powerful. Then he speaks of these two pairs of two. One is I and mine. So the misconception of I as the body, that's false ego. And the extension of that false ego is mine. What's mine is what's produced from me. And if I am this body, then what's mine is what's produced from this body. So if I work, then the fruits of my work are mine. And I am entitled to enjoy what's mine, the fruits of my work. Supposing I'm a carpenter, so I know how to use my hands with hammers and nails and saws and wood plane and so many things, and I can make a nice table. And it's mine because I made it with my body. Then I can take this table and take it to the grain merchant and say, I'll trade you my table for 3 bags of rice. He says, it's such a good table, I'll give you 4. Not likely, but... Or I'll take it to the market and just sell it for some money, and with the money I'll go buy something. And so the money is now mine, because I exchanged what was mine for another something that's mine. And then other things that I buy with my money, that's mine. My computer and my bicycle and my shoes and my winter coat and all these things that are mine that came from my body, my work. And then there's my husband or my wife and my child and my family, and that's mine. My bank balance and my taxes and my bills, that's also mine. Because it comes from my body. That's mine. And it starts from the false ego of I'm the body. So what happens if you don't have any false ego? That is to say, you have a spiritual conception of who you are. This body belongs to Krishna. It's given to me for some time. I'm to take care of it carefully and use it in service to Krishna. So the process of yoga, Kapila Dev is teaching, it dissolves false ego. Yay! What a relief. And with that, then also lust and greed. Greed means I want more things to be mine. And lust means I'm this body, the body wants to enjoy its senses. Lust. I want. And I want more. Lust and greed are dissipated by that connecting your consciousness instead of to matter to the Supreme. And then the mind becomes peaceful. More than peaceful. The mind becomes jubilant. Prabhupada writes, desire and greed are the products of false identification of oneself with the body. I'll just read a little bit. When one becomes freed from this contamination, then his mind and consciousness also become freed and attain their original state. Like that example, rain before it hits the earth. It's pure. The consciousness, its original state of consciousness and mind is pure, not attached, not mixed. Mind, consciousness, and the living entity exist. Whenever we speak living entity, this includes the mind and consciousness. The difference between conditional life and liberated life occurs when we purify the mind and consciousness. When they are purified, one becomes transcendental to material happiness and distress. I'll give a practical example. Srila Prabhupada. One time Prabhupada was holding his body, his arm up like this, and saying, this body is getting old. It's useless. Best to just get rid of it and get another one. Like you might look at, like a garment that's just has some rips and tears and just discard it. He's not identifying with it. Oh, this ache and this pain and this rip. Just detached. It doesn't mean that he didn't know that there was pain or a rip or something. Hari Sori was, who was Hari Sori, Prabhu? Prabhupada, he served as Prabhupada's personal servant, traveled with him and took care of everything for a number of years. And I saw Harisori at one of our GBC meetings in Mayapur. We were sitting together and asked him, I heard you had some health problems. How's your health? And he started describing his health, what he was dealing with. And then right away, because he's so attached to Prabhupada, he started speaking about Prabhupada's health. And he said something that I didn't know before. He said, Prabhupada, one of his kidneys didn't work at all, and the other one was working half. And that was one of the reasons why Prabhupada had massage, because kidneys eliminate toxins, and it wasn't eliminating the toxins properly, so it was massage, and he would drink water, and that would help eliminate the toxins in his body. He said, but factually Prabhupada was in constant pain, but he never even let on that he had pain. He said, except twice. One time in the middle of the night, they were somewhere, and it was cold night, and Prabhupada had a system where he would ring a buzzer, so his personal servant could come and attend. It was, 12 o'clock, 12:30 at night. Prabhupada was sitting in his room translating. He said he had his chadar over his head, and his whole body was trembling. And Prabhupada said, I'm in too much pain. I can't translate. And he said twice that happened, but Prabhupada was always in pain. He just transcended it. Then he went on. This is actually just started with a conversation. How's your health, Harisori? Just press the Prabhupada button, and he's just speaking about Prabhupada. He said one time Prabhupada had an abscess tooth. His whole jaw was swollen because there was an infection in a tooth. So the devotees asked Prabhupada, can we take you to a dentist? Prabhupada said, that's not necessary, just give me some cloves. Then he would just chew on the cloves. And it was still swollen. And then one day he was taking prasadam. Prabhupada reached in his mouth, pulled out the tooth, handed it to Harisori, and said, here, you can keep this. And then kept on continuing just with his prasadam. When you get a toothache, what it's like? Kind of, you can't think of anything else except the pain of the toothache. This was an abscess, he just transcended it. Happiness and distress. He wasn't unaware. He asked for the cloves. He just transcended it. It's not he was a stoic personality that can endure lots of pain. His consciousness was somewhere else. His consciousness was absorbed. And when your consciousness is absorbed, the comings and goings of duality, they're not the center of your consciousness. You're aware, it's day or it's night, or there's pain or there's pleasure. You're aware that it's there, but it's not what your consciousness is absorbed in. And that's what Kapila Deva is teaching to Devahuti. By this system of yoga, the significance of so-called pleasure and pain, it just fades. Prabhupada writes, in the beginning, Lord Kapila has said that the perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material happiness or stress. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. And how do you purify your mind and consciousness? You bring your mind to Krishna. And by chanting, Chaita Dharpana Marjanam. That's Shikshastakam, Lord Chaitanya's teaching. The first thing from chanting the holy name, the mind becomes cleansed. And then the consciousness behind the mind can also be cleansed. And when the mind and consciousness are cleansed, you can transcend happiness and distress. And it's not somebody else can do it but not me. It's we can do it. Every one of us can do it. We play ourselves. The process is very powerful and very effective. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. He's the supreme pure. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified and there's no chance of entrance of material desire and greed. So, I'll just cover one more verse and we'll end with the evening. Text 17, Kapila Dev says, "At that time the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size." What does that mean? As Krishna says in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the soul can never be cut by any weapon, moistened by water, or withered by the wind. You know of that verse from Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. Meaning, the soul is not material, because something that's material can be influenced by something material. Water can make it wet. Wind can make it dry. A weapon can cut it in pieces, but it's not material. So it can't be influenced by something material. So the soul is eternally Mame Vangsa Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says the soul is an eternal, fragmented part and parcel. You can't break into pieces the soul. Harry Potter was wrong. One devotee I know, actually it's a woman who's a lawyer, and she was very concerned that the whole world of, not just youth, but the whole world in so many languages are reading this Harry Potter book. What's there that they're reading? So she read it. And at the very last section, maybe some of the kids here know what the last section says because they read the whole thing. I just took her word for it. There's something about a splitting of the soul. I won't go into it, but it was, there's part of this diabolical, demoniac thing, and the soul, if there's this violent murder thing, then the soul becomes eternal. One soul splits and the soul becomes eternal. So who knows what kids are going to do with that one? Do some murder so they can become eternal. Something. But, sorry, Harry, it's not like that. The soul can't be split. It's just a nice story, maybe, but it's not so. It's fiction. Totally fiction. Because the soul can't be split. Eternally, the soul is connected to Krishna. The soul can be forgetful of their relationship with Krishna by misuse of free will and covered by material elements and the potencies of forgetfulness. But when by that process of yoga, when the mind and consciousness becomes cleansed by contemplation upon Krishna, then at that time the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. The soul is tiny, Anu, and the Supreme is very unlimitedly great, Vibhu. Anu and Vibhu. So the tiny serves the great. That's the natural conclusion. And that's what bhakti yoga is. The tiny soul serving the Supreme Soul. And that tiny soul is nirantaram, is non-different from the Supreme. not different in quality, although very tiny in quantity. Prabhupada uses this language, play on words, infinite and infinitesimal. Infinite and infinitesimal. Unlimitedly great and unlimitedly small. This living entity, the soul, the Jiva soul, is smaller than the atom. Super soul also enters within every atom, smaller than the atom, and bigger than the greatest at the same time. So this, when that Kapila Deva is saying, when that position of linking with the Supreme is matured, and consciousness and mind are purified, one's factual self-realization is made possible. One actually understands one's identity. And part of that identity is the servant of the Supreme Soul, eternally. And it's a very, very jubilant position. So, we'll end with that, and tomorrow we'll carry on with some further summary messages that Kapila Deva is going to present to Devahuti. Any comments or question? Yes. From the morning class, sure. Here comes the microphone.
In the morning, you talked about all ashramas for men, and you talked that like all ashramas for men, and the wife should stay home and take care of it by his son.
I didn't exactly say that. I didn't exactly say that, but go ahead.
No, yeah. My question is like, when a girl born, what is her responsibility as a daughter, as a wife, as a mother, or after like Grastha finish, her husband ready to take Vanprasth? Can she go with him with pilgrimage and all?
Can she go where?
With him, like if
yes.
he's planning to go with pilgrimage.
Yes.
Or if she cannot go and
no, she can go.
Okay. Yeah, it's later on. If she cannot go,
she can go.
No, my question is both sides. I didn't finish yet. If she cannot go, if she stay home with his children and
she
grandchildren,
can do that too.
So how can she get liberation? What is her responsibility? And if she works with his husband, if he get the liberation, can she get the liberation or is it different way?
You can hear and chant at home, can't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
But the main message here is Vedic culture says a woman should always be protected.
Yeah.
That's not disrespectful, that's respectful.
Right.
Protected doesn't mean exploited. Protected means protected because valuable. Where do you keep your valuables? In a very protected place because it's valuables. And women are considered very valuable in society, therefore always protected. So how is a woman to achieve spiritual perfection? From the frame of her life, very willingly be protected and internally cultivate bhakti. And how do you do that? By hearing and chanting. You can do that.
Yeah, I'm doing.
Okay, I'm sure you do. So be protected and hear and chant, achieve perfection.
It's easy way compared to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Something else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This is all again from the morning. We discussed about the acts of detachment.
Okay.
And also about like both the sides, the acts, using the acts of detachment and also connection with the Supreme.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
And with relation to the acts of detachment, my understanding is that that's what I understand, is that it is gradually leave the things.
Yes.
How do we keep it gradual but not fall into the trap of complacency?
By sincere desire, or a better word is sincere cultivation. I'll use another example and come back to your question. One of the descriptions for a practitioner, of a follower on the path of devotion to Krishna, is you should, it's Brahminical actually, you should maintain a simple lifestyle. So what is simple for one person may be very, very austere for another person. Okay, and I'm somewhere in between one of those two extremes. Very simple and, very complicated. I'm somewhere in between. So what do? On the one hand, I try to simplify. That is, I'm always trying to take another doable, sustainable step and just simplifying. Not something I can't sustain, not something impulsive that's extreme, and then the next day, sometime later, it's just back the other way even further. So some little steps. So I'm always trying to progress a little bit along that line of simple living and high thinking. Little by little by little. So it's the cultivation keeps it going. So complacency doesn't enter. But I also understand I need to do that which I can continue and maintain. So it's not too much, not too little. So sincerity that's incremental, or applied in an incremental way. So sincerity is what keeps it going. And incremental is what keeps it real or sustainable. And same with practically with whatever area of devotional service you want to work on and improve upon. All right?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You spoke about the Supreme Lord's glance towards the Pradhan, and then the false ego, mind, intelligence and senses. So I didn't understand, I didn't understand what that means. That
you didn't understand what means?
What does it mean that the working senses and those type of senses develop in Pradhan?
I'm not sure your question is. Pradhan is an undifferentiated state of the totality of matter, or the material elements. By the spiritual charge, the impregnation by the Supreme Lord's glance, the undifferentiated, one by one, begins to differentiate. They separate out. It's already there. In its undifferentiated, unmanifested, unseparated state, they start to separate out. And it's sequential. So, does that help?
Is it like a non-living being?
It's matter. Matter and its different components.
So is it that
there's a floor and it's marble. There's a rug and it's some kind of other material. And the rug is on the floor. The floor is beneath the rug. They're not the same, but they're different elements that are part of the room. So within Pradhan, there's different elements, but they're undifferentiated. The Lord's action of glancing, etc., brings about the differentiation. They're already there. And then they're separated out. I don't understand what the problem is.
So the senses come out in a subtle way, like when you say the
sure.
moving.
Sure, that's right. That's right. And then Lord Brahma comes along and he's got all these ingredients. He's got a big full warehouse of stuff to make the universe with. But before that, there's no ingredients because they're in an unmanifest state. It's part of the Lord's plan to bring creation into being. He makes the elements and provides the creator with the elements and the ability and the intelligence and the impetus. He gives him everything. On your mark, get set, go. Then he builds the universe. And then it's maintained, and then he withdraws it. It's not whimsical. It's done purposeful. The purpose is those living entities that are rebellious, they want to try to enjoy separately from the Supreme. So he creates that situation so they can try it. He warns them, you can't, but they want to try it anyways. So he gives them that facility. And built into it is the second reason for creation, to correct that mistaken consciousness. So there's so many lessons built into material experience that says, whoops, didn't work out. It's the house of detention and the house of correction. Both. Okay? Right in front here.
Talking about anarthas, it's all said that anarthas we can get rid of just by doing devotional service. But at the same time, I think there are anarthas that we should consciously try to get rid of also.
Yeah.
Right? How do we sort of, if you can elaborate on that, any guidance on that, if we should do one or the other?
Well, the devotional, two things. Devotional process is active, not passive. Prabhupada gives the example of taking a shower. You don't just go in the shower and stand there. It's active process to cleanse. When you're in a shower, you're active. So the bhakti, the devotional process is active, but where your consciousness needs to go during that activity is satisfying Krishna. Now, if I develop that I want to satisfy Krishna consciousness, that's the primary characteristic of a devotee. Krishna Eka Sharanam. Following behind that one, there's another 25. In order to achieve that, pleasing Krishna, then if this quality was nicely developed, it would be very pleasing to Krishna. If that quality was nicely developed, it would be pleasing to Krishna, and so forth. So following behind the one, the other qualities I may actively cultivate. But it's got to be following the one, otherwise it's not going to happen in a sustainable way. It won't be real. It won't be substantial. It will be now you see it, now you don't kind of thing. And that's not real. We want something that it's permanent, a natural feature of the soul. But the natural features of the soul follow behind this one. In that way, it's an active process. So when I'm attempting along that line to develop a quality that's pleasing to Krishna, or conversely, something that's not pleasing to Krishna, to eliminate it, it's not my effort that does that. It's Krishna's mercy combined with my effort that does that. That's where the bhakti element comes. Krishna's kindness enters into one's life. So, therefore, we sometimes find descriptions that says that we don't need any extraneous effort. That means the effort that we make is a devotional effort. It's not an extraneous effort. It's not a separate from devotion. I need to make some effort. It's a part of devotion. It's part of this Krishna Ekasharana effort. Does that work?
Maharaj, the different verses that we were hearing, that the calling for Krishna is much more sincere during suffering. But I was, at least in my case, I was thinking that it's still not genuine, and that's probably causing more pain than just pain coming from material suffering. They're still holding on to material attachments, and I feel it's very circumstantial and artificial, and that's much more painful. So I was wondering if you can tell us how we should work in such a situation.
Sure. What you're saying is, as they say in America, right on, sister. What's really painful, the essence of painfulness, is being disconnected from Krishna. And from that one, so many other painful circumstances. So it's not, so even if one can very adeptly do this or do that, or not do this or not do that if one wants to, and so on and so on. If you're an accomplished personality, it's not satisfying. If that connection with the personality of Godhead is not strong. So the solution is not, it's a gradual effort. It's a cultivation in Rupa Goswami's language. Anushilana, read the nectar of instruction, nectar of devotion, the introduction. It's an expansion of that verse, Krishna Anushilana. It's a cultivation. So go back to what you just said. The effort is not fully sincere. There's some sincerity, but not fully sincere. So you work with what you have, and you cultivate from there. It's simple. The problem comes when we want to pump ourselves up and be something that we're not, and imagine that we're something that we're not, and it's not real. It's an inflated conception of who we are. So take a real conception and work with it. It's humble. That's good. Work with what you have, whatever that is. And even that is likely to have a sine curve program, up and down and up and down, sometimes greater, sometimes lesser, unsteady bhakti. You work with what you have. And be honest about that, not this extreme or that extreme of putting yourself down or pumping yourself up. Just try to work with what you have. And it's quite modest. I'm saying I'm just each one of us. We should have a modest estimation. And accept that. Expect Krishna's mercy. Rupa Goswami teaches us we should expect Krishna's mercy. He's merciful. Expect his mercy and move. Offer with whatever sincerity you have. And Krishna will accept. And that's the relationship. And the relationship will grow because you're investing in that relationship, and Krishna will reciprocate because he's very kind. That's what to do. That was your question, what to do. That's what to do.
Maharaj, can I just ask one more?
Okay, can you speak right into the microphone?
Yeah. So we also often hear from you that the relationship with Krishna is not based on Vanik Seva.
It's not based on?
It's not like Vanik Seva, you know, that you put a coin.
Yes, it's not business dealings, right.
Yeah, so I was just trying to think that, you know, the commitment or the prayer from my side is obviously not sincere, and I was trying to understand how is Krishna going to reciprocate to such a feeling or such a prayer.
Well, let's not go too far in the opposite direction and say there's nothing. There's something. And Krishna sees that something. He sees better than you see. And he accepts. Better than you accept. Let's give Krishna some credit. While you're discrediting yourself, give Krishna some credit. Something is there and Krishna sees, and he's accepting. That's how you... Yeah. He's that kind of master. What did he see in Putana? Oh, she sees me as my mother. Okay, I'll give her eternal residence in Goloka Vrindavan as my mother, assisting Mother Jasoda. That's Uddhava's realization. Now we're not Uddhava. But his comment to Vidura is, who can find it? Can you find a better master? We all have to have a master. Can you find a better one? That's Krishna. He's so kind. So let's give him some credit for seeing even what you can't see and for accepting what you're not ready to give yourself credit for. He sees. Okay. We'll end with that. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.